Whether you're getting shot, stabbed or blown to bits, there's plenty of things to send you back to that spawn screen in Battlefield 1. Death comes in many forms, and obviously being a war game, you're gonna die quite a lot as you play. But sometimes you're gonna fall victim to some bloody annoying and often unavoidable thing that takes you out in the blink of an eye, completely out of the blue. Perhaps something that just can't be countered, or maybe something that just doesn't really seem very fair. I've devised a little list of some of the most notoriously irritating ways to die in Battlefield 1. The kind of deaths that leave you shouting at the screen, wanting to lob your controller through it. So here's 10 things that tend to piss a lot of people off, a teeny bit more than usual. Planes in Battlefield 1 can be pretty damn fun things to fly around, but maybe not so much for the poor buggers down below that keep getting showered by explosives every few seconds. A good pilot can troll an entire enemy team over and over again, and because a lot of them have the ability to drop bombs and can only really be countered if you make it your mission to shoot them down, this means that they can be pretty annoying to be killed by, and pilots know this for a fact. They're basically up there just to wind you up, and if you're running around in the middle of an open field with no cover or buildings nearby to scurry off to for safety, then you're probably going to be screwed when one swoops overhead. Most of the time you won't even notice the plane buzzing around in the sky, because you've got other problems you're trying to deal with on the ground, right up until the moment you notice the floor around you light up with a barrage of red indicators. But then of course it's too late, and you might as well accept the fact that you've yet again fallen victim to another pilot's successful trolling attempt. You can try and shoot them down with an LMG if you want, which you'll probably end up doing as a last ditch effort to get a bit of revenge. But of course, this is probably what the pilot wants you to do, as you're basically painting yourself as a target, informing the pilot that you're not very happy with them constantly dropping bombs on your head, and pretty much asking them to come back for another attack. Other than hopping into an AA gun, the best thing you can do is jump into a plane and show them who's boss. But other than that, you're basically relying on your teammates in allied aircraft to take care of them. Otherwise, you better get used to it raining bombs. One minute you're just casually minding your own business, and then a horse just comes out of nowhere and runs you the fuck over. Horses can be tricky beasts to maneuver sometimes, and they can be taken down fairly easily whenever the whole team chooses to light them up with bullets. But a sneaky one often slips by and charges into the fray, running down anyone that gets in their path. And if you see a horse dashing along one of the game's trenches or narrow pathways, there's not really a hell of a lot you can do to avoid getting trampled on, if you and your squad also happen to be in that trench too. If you really want to get humiliated, you could always wind up on the end of a cavalry lance, swinging around in the air like some sort of messed up kebab. Horses are pretty fast, and if you're not keeping an eye on your surroundings, a cavalry player can dash on over and turn you into roadkill before you even know about it. You're usually expecting to get killed by guns, explosives and typical war stuff in a war-based game, but horses don't exactly spring to mind as killing machines, and the fact that they can be pretty common on a lot of the game's maps and modes, you've got to constantly keep an eye on them and learn to be prepared to dodge out of the way of one charging right towards you at any given time. Good cavalry players can be a force to be reckoned with, but crappy ones can be hilarious to watch as they constantly struggle to stop running into walls. Though no matter who's riding one, it's never fun to be killed by a horse. The artillery truck, or as I like to call it, the explosive sniper. Because who the hell needs a rifle when you've got something that can essentially shoot people from the other side of the map and cause them to explode and die instantly? The artillery truck is well known for sitting on top of a hill and pissing people off, firing off shells towards other vehicles and infantry fairly accurately from a distance. And when someone eventually chooses to retaliate, which they almost certainly will at some point, then a sneaky artillery truck can slink off quickly and retreat from its camping spot to safely repair, whenever a bit of damage has been sustained. They might be a bit weaker than the average tank, but the fact that they can be so effective over longer ranges means that they can be a huge nuisance to scouts and other unfortunate soldiers in their sightlines running around far into the distance. And because tanks are a lot slower, this means that they're far less likely to escape from an attack, especially if that tank is in the middle of the open, like a sitting duck. If you got nowhere to hide, and an artillery driver's got you in their sights, then you're probably not going to last very long at all. Though if you can manage to sneak up on one and load the thing up with dynamite, then you'll save your team from a lot of rage, until the driver spawns into a new one of course, to repeat the whole process all over again. Nothing quite screams casual gamer like crouching down behind a rock and firing off mortars towards hostiles ahead, instead of actually fighting them yourself and using a bit of skill and courage. Mortar fire might not exactly be the most destructive thing in the game, but it's still a huge pain in the arse to put up with when you're trying to attack and take over an enemy objective, only to be picked off by some guy sat outside of the combat zone plotting down points on a map for his mortars to land. It's a pretty cheap and easy way to take out small clusters of enemy players, travelling along narrow trenches, advancing through choke points and contesting flags. and despite being a relatively effective way to support your team in some situations, there's no denying that it's a pretty cowardly option to pick, which is often why it can be such a bloody annoying thing to be killed by. It doesn't matter whether you've just taken on an entire enemy squad and come out alive, you're still not safe from that mortar guy who's perched just out of line of sight in a safe place, plotting to drop a bomb on your head to finish you off, preventing you from capturing that flag, and washing away all of your efforts in a fraction of a second. But although mortars can be one of the most irritating gadgets in the game, it can be fairly easy to track down the whereabouts of a mortar user by watching them pop up on the minimap every time they fire one off, which makes hunting them down and putting a bullet in their head an extremely satisfying thing to do. It's never fun to be stabbed by a knife in a gunfight, especially if that blade happens to be attached to the end of your enemy's rifle. The bayonet charge is definitely one of the most infuriating things to be killed by in Battlefield 1, down to the fact that in most cases, you barely got any time to react, shoot back, or dodge out of the way of that incoming blade. It always seems to get you, no matter how far away from it you think you are. As soon as you hear someone screaming at the top of their lungs like a madman, you know you could potentially end up skewered on the end of a blade. And most of the time, the only thing stopping you from dying is if the guy charging in your direction cocks up the charge and misses, dashing right the way on past you, and looking like a bit of a twat in the process. Sometimes an enemy might decide to charge at you with their bayonets at point blank range, which isn't really much of a charge, but still basically grants them with an instant way to win that fight without even firing their gun. A charging soldier will suddenly, just out of nowhere, transform into Usain Bolt, allowing them to cover ground at a rapid pace. And when you got one running at you, unless you happen to be holding a shotgun, which you can use to blast them away as they get closer, even your reaction times won't usually be enough to stop that blade travelling right the way through your chest. Speaking of shotguns, they also happen to be on this little list of terrors, as they can almost be unstoppable in close range situations, and this can lead to a lot of rage when you happen to be trying to advance through an area which is quite confined with a lot of short sightlines. So basically most of the places where the flags and objectives tend to be, where you'll be obliged to go if you want to win the match. Shotguns are a significant part of what makes the assault class work, as it's their role to get right up into the action and cause as much pain as possible up on the front lines, pushing the enemy back to capture objectives. But just because they're important to the assault class doesn't mean that they're not pesky things to be up against, and because a lot of them can obliterate you in the blink of an eye with one pull of the trigger, this means that they can be fairly effective weapons in the hands of noobs, and truly devastating weapons in the hands of pros. Shotguns have the quickest kill times in the game in close quarters, often being able to wipe a player out before they even know what hits them. And although they're pretty useless things to equip for range gunfights, a shotgun user can lock down a key place on a map, basically stopping players from passing through, taking over a flag, or even entering a building. And when they're wielded by a corner camper, lurking in the shadows of an area that you need to travel through, the shotgun can often be used as a tool to cause maximum annoyance on the battlefield. I think everyone can agree that grenades are some of the most annoying things to be killed by in Battlefield 1, and I think everyone's guilty of contributing to these punishing deaths by using them. At the end of the day, why the hell not? Grenade spam is one of the big problems the Battlefield games have faced in the past, and it's a problem that's likely to persist in the future, down to the fact that everyone's entitled to their own little lobbable pocket explosive to help flush enemies out of areas and get some extra kills. But when someone chooses to equip a gadget that grants them with even more grenades, and basically increase that grenade spam in favour of sacrificing something that might probably help the team more so, like being able to provide them with more health and ammo, then there's a good reason to be a tad more frustrated when you notice that the room that you've just entered is being littered with bombs, and you really wish that you'd equip that flak specialisation. The rifle grenade is often dubbed as being Battlefield 1's answer to the noob tube, along with the crossbow launcher that DICE decided to add to the game at a later date. Not exactly a brilliant thing to include if you want to decrease grenade spam, but hey ho. And although the smoke launcher can be used for tactical benefits, a lot of people are going to prefer something with a bit more bang, as they want to get more kills. And when you're caught out in a confined space or room with a bunch of rifle grenades pinging around all over the place, there isn't really much you can do, other than to get pissed off about the heavy grenade spam in the game, and get ready to be sent back to that spawn screen shortly after. When people talk about things being overpowered, the elite classes usually spring to mind, as they're essentially beefed up juggernauts kitted out with extra health and firepower, and should you come face to face with a sentry wielding a Villa Perosa or a flame trooper in CQC, then you can safely presume that you're probably not going to come out of that battle alive. Elite class soldiers can be taken out using normal weaponry, and they're also prone to being targeted by bayonet users, with bayonets killing them instantly in one quick move. Though if you get caught out with no time to react or fight back, the elite soldier is always going to have the advantage, mainly down to the fact that your gun alone usually won't be enough to bring them down, unless you're working together with your allies and focusing fire on that elite soldier. The weapons they wield aren't particularly magnificent, with most only really being effective up close, but it's the fact that they're basically bullet sponges, boasting a lot more health than you, making them quite annoying to take on and survive whenever one happens to be around, as you can empty a few of your magazines firing at one, only for them to spin around and wipe you out with barely any effort. If you're not taken by surprise by an elite soldier, then you can play smart by using flanking tactics to gun them down from an awkward position, stab them in the back with a melee weapon or bayonet, or you could always just avoid them completely if you want to stay out of trouble. But a lot of the time, an elite soldier is going to pop out of nowhere and mow you down at random points while you play, and because it isn't exactly a fair fight, you're likely to get a bit peeved when you do. Remember a while ago when the TRIPWIRE HE bombs dealt a reasonable amount of damage, just enough to allow a scout player to finish off a weakened enemy in a couple of pistol rounds or a shot from a rifle, but not quite enough to blow them sky high and deliver a one-hit kill? Well, things are a bit different now, as you've probably noticed that TRIPWIRE bombs seem to be a lot more effective nowadays, and that's because they deal more damage towards a player if that player runs nearby instead of walks. A lot of the time, TRIPWIRE bombs can be seen and predicted to be located in certain places at the top of ladders, like the obvious ones on Ballroom Blitz, and of course at the top of stairways, and that's mainly used as a bit of security for the scout player that's using that building as a sniper's nest. But a lot of the time, tripwires are now mainly used to net some cheap kills, and players are now hiding them amongst bushes and in really random spots, as they know full and well that someone's eventually going to dash on by at some point and be the victim of a one-hit kill. You could argue that the player killed by the tripwire should be a bit more observant and wary as they move around the map. But because everyone runs around in Battlefield 1 to get to their destination quicker, because maps are pretty big in Battlefield, and because tripwires can be really bloody hard things to spot sometimes, amongst the detailed environment and all the action taking place within it, getting randomly blown up by a hidden tripwire bomb as you're running along can definitely be seen as an inconvenience, especially when the player who planted it just got a cheesy insta-kill that required no sort of skill or challenge to obtain. If anything's going to grind your gears in Battlefield 1, it's probably getting killed over and over again by the same bloke sat in the seat of a truly overpowered and almost indestructible vehicle, constantly dropping bombs on your head from a distance or gunning you down from a safe place. Behemoths present a one-sided fight, and the guys manning the turrets and artillery guns can only usually be killed when a behemoth eventually takes enough damage from explosives, causing its destruction. It's kinda like being up against some sort of top tier kill streak that just won't friggin' go away. And if you're not the sort of player who likes to sit around effortlessly racking up kills and winding up the opposing team in an almost unstoppable armoured vehicle, then you're probably unfortunately going to get mowed down and unfairly blown up by Battlefield 1's behemoths quite a lot, as you run around as a vulnerable infantry player trying to fulfill your role in the game. It can be eventually taken out, but it's not exactly a very quick process, especially if none of your teammates can be bothered joining you in your mission to destroy it, as it'll often take lots of casualties and many deaths before your team decides to swap over those bolt-action rifles for rocket guns instead. Some behemoths can be more of a pain in the arse to put up with than others, and although they can't be repaired, it takes a hell of a lot of firepower to get rid of them once and for all, and by that point, they've already wiped your whole team out 6 times over. It's safe to say that behemoths are amongst the most annoying things to be killed by in Battlefield 1, especially when you're usually getting killed repeatedly by a guy who's only really bothered about boosting his KD ratio. So there we have it folks, 10 annoying things to be killed by in Battlefield 1. No hard feelings to anyone who actively uses any of these things in the list, as there's lots of other stuff in the game that tend to wind people up too. But these are some of the things that myself and a large portion of the community can agree generally cause quite a lot of rage. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what weapons, gadgets and vehicles give you the biggest headache, and subscribe to my channel to see more Battlefield videos on there if you wish. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.